Welcome everybody to this week's show. It is episode 3 of You Can't Comp This podcast. I'm your host, Russell Gibson. Unfortunately, Santa Claus's elves are reporting that Adam Amy is under the influence of eggnog and can't make it this week, but we are going to still deliver you an episode. This week, we're going to go around the league and we're going to discuss Danny Ainge returning to the Utah Jazz. We're also going to talk about the COVID protocols and the players that are currently in it. Of course, we're going to do Zion Watch. We're going to discuss Isiah Thomas, Kyrie Irving, and we're going to look at some players who's had a little bit of movement in terms of their card value in the last couple of months. We're going to look at Karl Anthony Towns, Bradley Beal, Jordan Poole, and Miles Bridges. The big topic this week, though, is Steph Curry. I really wanted to do a deep dive into Steph Curry because I feel as though his recent achievement of becoming the all-time leader in three-pointers made is huge. It's something that we have to acknowledge, and this is my little way of paying tribute to Steph. I also think too that from a personal standpoint, I haven't given his hobby value enough respect, and I haven't given it enough time. So this is something that I wanted to set right for myself, and also something other people will enjoy too. The big thing for me, though, this week is I'd really like to shout out everyone who contributed to the post that we put up onto Card Addicts Australia. I think without your support and your feedback and your contributions, I don't think this week's episode would have been as strong as what it is. So thank you so much for that. And I'm also going to do some personal shout outs to people as the episode is moving along, because I've received a lot of helpful information from people via direct message, and I would like to make sure that's been duly acknowledged. So let's get on with this week's show. Enjoy. Okay, guys, let's start with something that is definitely of a personal interest to me. I really like it when teams announce assistant coaches, head coaches, even to somewhat enjoy, with the trainers are being announced. So Danny Ainge being ousted for Boston, to me, was a really big movement around the league, and it didn't get really a lot of media coverage, and I would probably say that was done out of respect for Danny Ainge. I think the way that the Celtics handled it, was really quite professional. It's also interesting now that he's landed this new job, and there has been a little bit of analysing of the press conference of when Danny Ainge was let go. Zach Lowe did a really good deep dive into this. He basically said that there was never a word that came out of Danny Ainge's mouth of the word retirement. So another way that could be, now interpreted as that he was, definitely moved sideways out of that position. So from my perspective, I think Danny Ainge is one of the best general managers in the league in terms of acquiring talent and also constructing trades. His acquisition of Jason Tatum and also a first-round pick for Fultz is basically an all-timer. And the other trade that, you really can't go past too is the pick swapping that he did with the New Jersey Nets in that time that he moved out Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett at the end of their careers. And I think that particular pick swapping trade, the way that was constructed, really has left like a lasting imprint through the league. So that's something now that's almost done as a necessity to get deals done, and that was really something that Danny Ainge came up with and constructed. So I think him joining the Utah Jazz as a CEO and an alternate governor is really important, because the Utah Jazz are probably one or two trades away, and maybe something that their strength that they have definitely done is drafting really well and building internally and making sort of, fringe free agent signings, and, picking up Mike Conley was probably one of the bigger moves that they've done. So I think, Danny Ainge coming into that space could be, really powerful and really important. The other really interesting footnote to this story too is that one of the minority owners is Ryan Smith, who turns out to be a longtime friend of Danny Ainge and also an alumni of Brigham Young University. So that's also, something that you can't, go past. There's obviously that connection there. And from a useless piece of information perspective, it's a 1 hour and 42-minute drive, according to Google Maps, from BYU to the Vivint Arena, which is where the Utah Jazz play their game. So let's move on to our second talking point, which is about the COVID protocols. Look, I would say that this list that I'm about to read out is not going to be all-inclusive, just for the fact that players are moving into protocols on a daily basis. So Chicago Bulls, Josh Richardson, Jabari Parker, Grant Williams, Al Horford, Hernan Gomez. Brooklyn Nets, LaMarcus Aldridge, DeAndre Bembry, James Johnson, Jevon Carter, Paul Millsap, James Harden, Bruce Brown, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. Chicago Bulls, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Kobe White, Derrick Jones Jr., Troy Brown Jr., Josh Sanu, Javonte Green, Matt Thomas, Stanley Johnson, Isiah Johnson, Isaac Okoro for the Cavs, Golden State Warriors, Jordan Poole. I suspect Steph Curry is going to be onto that list now after he was seen partying with Kevin Durant till 5 o'clock in the morning. LA Clippers, Serge Ibaka, Lakers, Westbrook, THT, Dwight Howard, Avery Bradley, Kendrick Nunn. Grizzlies, Ja Morant's been out, and the Grizzlies have won 9 out of 10 games since Morant's been out. So that's a really interesting little development there. Miami Heat, Caleb Martin, I think he's still recovering from being dunked on by Ant-Man. Milwaukee Bucks are out with Giannis, DiVincenzo, Wes Matthews, Bobby Portis. Knicks are missing Barrett Toppin, Quentin Grimes, Kevin Knox II, Emmanuel Quickley. Orlando Magic are missing RJ Hampton, Terrence Ross, Mo Wagner. The list just goes on. It's just incredible. Philadelphia 76ers are missing George Niang. So just incredible. Now, if you're looking for a little bit more information on that and the statistics around it, Kirk Goldsberry, follow him on Twitter. He did a really good graphic of the number of players that have been entered protocols. It's just absolutely escalating like crazy now. Alrighty. On to Zion Watch. His PSA 10 base last sold for $222. His silver last sold for $1,800. So we're now down 50% on the last 3 months. So just, an incredible, dip that this guy is on. The latest injury update for him is a further 4 to 6 weeks he's going to be out. So still a long way off for him. I think that this could be like a season-ending injury, to be honest. I really see them having, zero motivation to him to come back. I think they're going to be ultra-conservative with him, and I just don't see him coming back this year. So that's also really interesting. The other injury update from the Pelicans too is Kira Lewis Jr. is out, so he's going to be out for the season. He did an ACL, which is a really unfortunate injury for him, and, all the best. I hope he gets well soon. On a much more positive note, Isiah Thomas has been signed to the LA Lakers as an emergency replacement. He stepped in and scored 21 points for the Lakers, top scored for them, and they defeated the Utah Jazz 124 to 103. So, moving back to our boy Kyrie Irving, the Nets have announced that they are now going to allow him to play as a part-time player. He's refusing to get vaccinated, but he can't play in any New York games, so he can't play home games, but he can play the road games. So that actually is significant because Kevin Durant currently is playing 37 minutes per game and is also in the COVID protocols. The Nets actually have 27 road games left, so that could really give the team a little bit of rest, and it could also give them a little bit of boost, and hopefully something gets worked out. He can be reintegrated back into the team and they can make a deep playoff run, because that will be, really good to see. So let's move on to some monthly movements from Card Ladder Index. Really big movers, and some of these we've already talked about, but I just couldn't really, go past them again. But Darius Garland is up 26% in the last 3 months. Karl Anthony Towns, someone that we haven't spoken about in the last couple of weeks, is actually up 31%. I would tie all of that directly to the Wolves' excellent performance. The Wolves have been playing really well. It looks as though they're going to make it to the play-in game, maybe even make it into the 6th seed. That'll be really exciting, I think, for Minnesota fans, just for the fact that they really have been long-suffering. But Ant-Man's looking really good. Karl Anthony Towns is definitely rounding into form, and it also seems as though D'Angelo Russell is getting a little bit of chemistry there too with Ant-Man, so that's, to me, really important, because I sort of had the feeling maybe they were going to pull the trigger on one more trade. Maybe Russell's going to be moved on, so it's good that they're definitely coexisting. Bradley Beal is down 30%, and this one really surprised me, actually. So it does make me wonder a little bit as to why he's down so much. I could imagine people that maybe were waiting for him to have this sort of uptick in performance, and now they've offloaded some of their PC to flip into something else, which has, potentially contributed to that. I'm a little bit out of a loss. I would have thought that he was someone that you'd see a little bit of, more growth in. So yeah, that's a bit of a interesting one. I think something to keep a bit of an eye on, because with someone dipping down 30% like that, and you could argue that he is a blue chipper, you could also see him being traded to a bigger team and putting that team over the top, because he's been linked to pretty well every team in the league at this stage. Yeah, definitely someone that, if he's down 30%, there's definitely some value to be had there. So Darren Fox, look, we've talked about him the last couple of weeks, ad nauseum. Interestingly, though, he's only down 20% in the last 3 months. In my mind, it seems a lot more than that. So maybe what that 20% actually means is that, on some cards where he has been down 40 to 50%, as we previously discussed, he's actually made a little bit of a bounce back. But again, finally, from the stuff that I've been keeping a track of, that doesn't seem to be the case. So it could be more that on his overall cards, it's not just the ones that I've been tracking, that he's actually picked up quite a lot. So these next two, though, are really interesting ones, because this is two that I was definitely not anticipating to see this. So Jordan Poole is actually down 29%, and Miles Bridges is also down 20% the last 3 months. So this might be literally the classic pump and dump, where people have seen this, huge spike in production, seen this huge spike in, card values coming up, and they've literally just cashed in. And as more cards have come into the market, they've just sort of seen that little bit of a trickle down effect. If there's anyone in there from the finance world that would like to tell me this appropriate term, we could maybe introduce this to the show instead of me trying to describe it like this every time. Always keen to hear your feedback, lads. And this is probably the perfect time for me to shout out our handles. So Instagram, youcantcompthis, Twitter, @youcantcompthis. If you'd like to send us an old school email, youcantcompthis@gmail.com. And of course, we've got our trusty Facebook set up, You Can't Comp This Podcast. Alrighty guys, let's move into our big topic from this week, which is Steph Curry. And I'm definitely not the greatest Steph Curry collector. I do have a couple of, very ultra low end items, and which is really funny in some ways, because I love Steph Curry's game. I love the way that he plays the game. I love the way that he is a great role model. He seems to be a great dad. He also does a lot of charitable works. And I also think, too, he's a generational player. He's really changed the way that the game is played. Offensively, I've just seen, nobody like this guy, where it just seems as though no matter where he's on the court, you just expect it to go in. Really has flown under the radar for me in terms of a hobby perspective. So this is something that I definitely want to look into. The theme for this week is I would like to do his 10 most iconic cards. And I think that people could definitely disagree with me on 5 of these cards. And if that is the case, I'm not going to be shocked, because I didn't do it in terms of the highest value cards. I definitely didn't do it in terms of the highest value cards. Actually, some of the cards on here are literally, $1 or $2 cards. And I wanted to do it in terms of cards that are going to mean something in 10 years' time or 20 years' time, and also cards that people can purchase and connect with him. So, of course, we can have some ultra high-end stuff, but we're also going to have some stuff that you can purchase today at a reasonable price too. So that was something that was on my mind as I was putting this list together. So again, if you would like to tell me what I've done wrong or tell me what I've done right on this list, please drop a message to me on our socials. We would really appreciate that. So how we put this list together was actually, we did a post on Sports Card Addicts Australia, and we asked people to contribute what they thought were the important cards. So we had a lot of feedback on this post, and it was, to be honest, incredibly warming to see it. And it also really helped me out a lot too, because I think I had maybe 5 or 6 cards that I was pretty certain on, and another couple of cards I was maybe on, but I definitely had some blanks there. So it helped me to, reaffirm in the direction that I wanted to go in, and also to maybe eliminate a couple of cards that I had in my head. So I couldn't put everyone's cards into the list, but I definitely want to do some honorable mentions. So thank you very much, Gary Spears with his Tyson Beck card, Siba Tamayo with his blank slate, Richard Westwood with his pink Pulsar Prism floating layup, John Lottogren with his 1 of 1, Lane Pierce with his flawless 3 out of 5, Gav Andrews with his flawless on-card auto, Cody Hipper with a Tyson Beck rainbow, and Mitch Ipkandaz with his Noir Reigning Knight. So again, guys, thank you so much. And if I have missed you, if you've posted since I put my little prep together, I do apologize for that. So I'm going to do 10 cards, 10 being the 10th card. And then the last card that I talk about is going to be number 1. And that's going to be the card that I think is the most influential card of all time. So I think we should start with Tyson Beck, because now that I've had sort of a day to think about the post that went up, the post was very heavily Tyson Beck orientated. And I think that is a lot to do with, us being Aussies. But I'd also say too is that Tyson at the moment has captured Steph Curry at the absolute perfect time. I think releasing his card to coincide with his record-breaking achievement is, incredible timing, which again could be something I could learn from a finance or a marketing person. But if we want to reflect that back to selling cards, it is really, really important to pick the right time to sell cards because, maybe in the back of your mind, or maybe this is just me, you do think that your cards are going to keep going up, forever and ever. But invariably, like we learned on The Simpsons with Homer hanging onto his pumpkins just after Halloween, everything doesn't keep going up. It will eventually sort of come down or come crashing down in Homer's example. So yeah, absolutely perfect timing from Tyson there. The card that Tyson actually nominated for him was the blue background card. It's got 3 images, all really iconic images of Steph Curry and also, the Golden State area. It's got the Golden Gate Bridge. It's got Steph spotting up for a jumper and also him with that very trademark celebratory clap. Absolutely beautiful card, Tyson. Hats off to you on that, mate. You absolutely nailed the design. And of course, the autograph looks beautiful too. And I think we'll talk a little bit later on about autographs and on-card auto and sticker autos, but maybe what really needs to be talked about or emphasized on this, that it is an on-card auto. The way that the card is structured out, I think Tyson's put a lot of thought into in terms of the thirds of the card. So in terms of like the north-south, the card has been broken up really nicely into thirds. But then if you're looking at it from top to bottom, you can also see where he's beautifully made out the top third with Steph spotting up, the middle part with Steph clapping his hands, and then the entire bottom third of the card is basically just dedicated, and it really draws your eyes towards the autograph. So I think that is, really beautifully done. Hats off to you, Tyson. You've done a beautiful job. Alrighty, guys, so let's move on to card number 9. So for card number 9, we've actually nominated the Upper Deck First Edition rookie card and also the just straight Upper Deck rookie card. I did cheat a little bit on this because I've put 2 cards in together, but really, at the end of the day, it is the same card. This card was actually nominated by Brent Sims and Adam Crosley, respectively, so thank you so much, boys. I really do appreciate that. The thing that really stands out to me on this card is the fact that Steph is in his Davidson uniform, and I think that in our current market, draft products really don't carry a lot of cachet, and also too, their value really crashes hard once they've had that sort of, really strong release. So I think it's really interesting that this card has sort of held its cachet for this long, despite the fact he is in his Davidson uniform. But I also think too, it is probably a good reminder of where does Prism Draft products stand in our current hobby, because I don't think every player and every card at a Prism Draft is something that you should be hanging on to in terms of, long-term value. But maybe each year what you could do is you could actually use this as a reminder that you can pick out 1 or 2 values, and long-term they will hold, a small amount of value. So in the last 12 months, you could say, well, the card to collect will be LaMelo Ball because they're live autographs that are coming out of that product. And that's something that you might think is, worth holding on to. Or you might just go, well, the silver prisms are the ones to be chasing. If you're looking to obtain one of these cards, a Raw recently sold on the 14th of December for $65 US. That to me is, if you are looking to get into a Steph Curry rookie, this is something you could definitely be turning your attention to. I think the last thing that we should probably point out about this card too is essentially that this card was an end of the era for the Upper Deck, in that they lost their NBA license at around this time, which also is the explanation for him being in his Davidson uniform instead of his Golden State uniform. Ryan Cracknell wrote an excellent blog on Beckett.com on Steph Curry cards, and interestingly, he ranked the Exquisite card, which is an on-card autograph, but it's also in his college uniform, as number 2 overall in his list. So for me, I couldn't rank that Exquisite card on my list at all, just for the fact that it is in a college card, and also just due to the the astronomical price. I think those two in combination just really ruled it out for me. So interesting contrast there. Let's move on to number 8, and I definitely cheated on this next one because putting 10 cards onto a list was actually really difficult. So for this one, what I did was I put Downtown and Kaboom in together. So I did that because I have a real sweet spot for the Downtown and the Kaboom cards, and I really wanted to include both of them. So I just did this to make my list work. Tim Dawson nominated the Studio Downtown, and my personal favorite is actually from the Cornerstones 18-19. I just find from 16-17, they really polished the cards up just a little bit more. And also too, they've really emphasized the narrative. So for me, that just really stands out the card just a little bit more. The obvious pluses of the studio downtown is the color scheme. I think they absolutely nailed that, and I think Tim would probably appreciate that. I think design-wise also too, if you carefully look at it, there are some design similarities to the splash cards from the Optics of 1920, which I'd never noticed before doing preparation for this show, so check that out if you've got some time. The resale on these cards is extremely high also, so if they're not in your PC, you might have missed the boat on these or have to really move some of your PC to make this happen. For the Kaboom card, John Lonergan nominated this, and he nominated the 1415 Kaboom. And that card to me is all raw potential and just full of fresh ideas. And the later generation of these cards simply took this amazing design and refined it to basically a sharpened blade. So I find the image of the 1415 a little bit too cartoonish. By the time I got to the 1617 Excalibur, I think they absolutely nailed the picture, which is obviously still a caricature drawing, but they also got that ratio of caricature drawing to realism to a perfect ratio. The other thing that I really think they did well in the 1617 Excalibur is that they captured the iconic moments of not only Steph Curry, which is in this image is him doing a two-fisted celebration. They also captured so many other players from that set in just beautiful fashion and just iconic pictures. You know straight away, even if it was a silhouette of these players, you would know who it is. So I think definitely check out that set if you would like to see it a little bit more. In terms of pricing, again, the Kaboom, the downtown, is really sitting to that same sort of price range as they're looking, particularly for Steph Curry. It's quite an expensive card. Okay, card number 7 is 2009-10 Classic Steph Curry rookie card. It is autographed, it's on-card autographed, and it's numbered to 499. This was nominated by Damian Sanders, and Ryan Cracknell actually listed this at number 4 on his list, and he summarized the card perfectly. On-card auto, numbered card, and simple design, and this card absolutely nails all of those things just in one go. For me, the real standout of this card, though, is the color scheme. It's a very bright card. It's very airy and it has just a lot of room to move. There's not a lot on the card. It's literally just Steph Curry with a border around him and this beautiful on-card auto right in your field of vision there. If you compare Prism rookie cards from this year, which is a base card, I think with the silver background and the silver border, there's not a lot of light that gets let into this card. Whereas this card is really the polar opposite of that. It's got a beautiful light and bright border, and also the bottom third of the card creates a lot of light and space into the card too, so it's just a beautiful card. Card number 6 is the 2009-10 limited Steph Curry rookie card. It is a jersey autograph to $2.99. This was nominated by Josh Waters. There is a lot happening on this card, but for me it really works. I think the quality of the swatch, the low numbering, and just the general unique appearance of this card is quite exceptional. And the general unique appearance of this card make it exceptional. In a lot of ways, this card was quite pioneering in terms of the appearance and also perhaps the leading into the Prism technology. The interesting comparison for this card is the next card on our list, which is the Playoff Contenders, where they take the exact opposite approach to the autographed. So in this instance, the limited, it uses a sticker auto. We can really see Steph has squeezed it into the sticker, where the Contenders auto really breathes because it's an on-card auto. It has all the space in the world to make itself the feature point. Why did this card come 6th? Why did this card come 5th? For me, that's really what it came down to. I think the swatches on these cards are absolutely beautiful, but where the Playoff Contenders card really stands out is the fact that it is an on-card auto. And maybe this is a really good example of where you can say to yourself, why is it important for cards to have on-card autos versus sticker autos, and just look at these two cards and compare them, because the difference that is there is just so stark. It's almost like just two completely different cards altogether. I mean, it's obviously two different cards, but what I mean by that is it's almost two cards in completely different categories, where one is this, really amazing on-card autograph where the on-card auto becomes the feature. And then you've got a sticker auto, which becomes part of the card. It becomes, there's the card, there's the patch, and then there's the sticker auto, which all sort of becomes a package. So it's a really interesting point of conversation. Okay, card number 5 is 09-10 Playoffs Contenders, and we have already touched on this card a little bit, but I think it's worth discussing a little bit more. This card was nominated by Damian Sanders, and this card really grew on me, and it shot up my list even as I was putting the list together, because it's a card that's actually quite amazing to look at. I spent a lot of time looking at this card. Maybe my initial thoughts were to write it off just for the fact that it's a Contenders card, and I'll be honest, I'll be completely honest about that. That was my initial impression, but the more that you look at this card, the more there is to appreciate it. The color scheme is absolutely beautiful. I think the blue border at the top perfectly matches his uniform. The autograph is just spectacular, and it's in a very unique spot on the card. I really feel as though the whole card was designed for the autograph. My current fascination is looking at the sticker autos. And I think we should acknowledge that we're currently in the midst of a sticker pandemic where all products, including even one-of-ones, are coming out with stickers on it. I can understand that players are struggling to sign cards in person just due to the fact of COVID and all the printing problems that the companies have been having. So I understand that 100%. So please don't think there's a criticism, but maybe it is a really good time to sort of reflect on maybe what our cards would have been looking like if they did have on-card autos on them instead of stickers. Because if you look at some of the stickers, you can definitely tell that they've really struggled to get their autograph onto the sticker. Stickers are often cut off. Sometimes it's north and south where they've been cut off, and then even sometimes east-west, like the autographs are just a little bit too long. So it's another interesting variable that goes into our cards, and even though it's not perfect, they're somewhat unique because every sticker will be a little bit different. But this particular card just lets the autograph shine. So yeah, just spend a couple of minutes just checking that out. It's really quite cool. Okay, card number 4, and I am really bracing for a bit of feedback on this, maybe even a lot of negative feedback, but I'm going to put the splash insert from Donruss Optic at number 4. So this is a personal favourite of mine for quite a fair few reasons, but Bobby Reynolds put some really interesting points up on the page, and I'm going to read it verbatim. I personally have a lot of belief in the first year splash cards from 2019 Optic being one of the splash bros, and it just being a really cool looking insert, plus it's a fairly obtainable, affordable card set. But a tough grade being Optic cards, meaning gem mints will stay low pop. Would love to hear your thoughts. So, mate, I basically couldn't agree with you more. I think you've touched on a lot of really important points in that they are absolutely beautiful cards, but also they're affordable, and I think that's really important in today's age. I think over the last couple of years, Panini has artistically taken risks on insert sets, and what I mean by that, they can attempt new ideas on designs and concepts. Relatively, if they stick or they don't stick, it doesn't really matter, because inserts aren't as hotly collected as rookie cards or even veteran-based cards. So I think it's important for them to nail, and I mean, 100% nail the rookie cards, because they're the cards that everyone's going to be looking at every day. But some insert sets, it doesn't matter if they don't get the design right. It's just good for them to give something a go. Now, the flip side of that is some insert sets completely take off. So Net Marvels is the obvious example recently where that set was basically just sitting in everyone's PC. They maybe weren't even in top loaders, and then they became 3-figure cards. So that was a really cool one that basically caught off. I also really love NBA fringe players. I love role players, and to give them a set of cards that may not be the high flyers of the league or frequently on highlight reels or ESPN, to me is really important. So also, I think to emphasize too is the game has changed, and the values of the game has definitely changed too, and the 3-point shot is a very valuable shot. So giving 3-point shooters their own set, a splash set, is a really cool timestamp on where the NBA game is at this moment in time. So I also want to highlight this card for people that want to buy a Steph Curry card, maybe one card, maybe two cards, and you are on a budget. So Bobby cited 1920, but also have a look at the 2021 set. I think the design is excellent. I think that the 2021 card is a little bit more flamboyant. So you might be looking at the 1920 card if you want something a little bit more classic. Both are still pretty obtainable. So a base recently sold of Steph Curry for $1. You're obviously going to be paying postage on top of that, but you could also get a holo for $13.5. So something that is definitely obtainable if you want to add something to your collection. Alrighty guys, we're getting towards the big boys, so we've only got 3 cards left. These last 3 for me, really, it wasn't even a difficult decision. In fact, it was a very, very easy decision. It was something that I really enjoyed doing, and I probably spent a little bit more time on this than I realized, because I probably wasn't expecting to put the gold refractor in. I was just going to go with the base or the silver refractor, but the more I looked at the gold, the more I realized that it had to be separate from the silver refractor, and it needed its own spot. So without further ado, let's do the final 3. So number 3, I did the silver refractor, the Topps Chrome rookie card. And you might think this is simply, lazy journalism or lazy investigation, but I think it's really important that we acknowledge both of these cards. So I think when I was initially mapping this out, I had the silver refractor as the number 1 card. As I started to do more research and I started to put the list together, it was pretty obvious that this card was going to drop down the list. So it's at number 3. Interesting though, these cards are actually numbered to 500. So this is a huge difference from today's silver refractors, or silver prisms as what we call them now, where the pop counts could be in the 40,000 mark. So that's a really interesting little thing to remember, is that the scarcity of these cards is dramatically different. So the PSA 10 pop count is 28, BGS 9.5 is 97, and I couldn't find any 10s recorded. So that's a really interesting footnote also too, because if you think about the number of cards that are being graded, so PSA 10 is 28 and BGS 9.5 is 97, that you could argue that there's 4 times more BGS cards graded. And I actually wonder again if that's a little bit of a timestamp of that era where at that particular time BGS was king of the castle, and now where we're seeing the complete opposite, where you've got 17,000 Zion rookie cards that are being graded, but they're not 17,000 BGS cards. They're 17,000 PSA cards. We've seen a complete role reversal of where people are choosing to send their cards to be graded. Number 2, we've got Topps Chrome Refractor numbered to 50. BGS 10 pop count is 1. PSA 10 pop count is 2. So ultra low pop count there with those cards in terms of your gem mints. And I think Bill Laurie would have said this would be the Australian gold. And this card, to me, just absolutely pops. I think the real icing on the cake for me for this card is the fact that the gold matches his Golden State uniform. So to me, that just says it all. I think the baby face, that really, beautiful smile that he's got there. It's got the Golden State emblem on it, which again is that sort of stark contrast to the upper deck at that time where he's still in his, Davidson uniform. Yeah, this card is just an absolute classic. It's an all-timer. For a moment, I did genuinely think about putting this card number 1. I really had a lot of trouble hashing this out. Was this going to be number 1? Was this going to be number 2? But I couldn't go past his 09-10 National Treasures as being number 1. One of one Logoman recently sold for $5.9 million in a private sale. This was the highest selling NBA card of all time. I don't really need to say a lot about this card. It's iconic. It's beautiful. His autograph is just sitting in the right spot. Interesting though, it got a PSA 8. And I have a lot of different thoughts about this actually. I think some cards, the grade does matter. Of course it matters, but at the same time, I think some cards just really don't grade well. They're not really meant to be graded, but the fact that it's been encapsulated, it's been catalogued, that may be more important than the actual PSA grade. I also think too, at some point, really what is the difference between an 8 and a 10? The condition of a card that is PSA 8, to be honest, some of I'm saying this in air quotes now, my biggest cards I've actually purchased have been PSA 8s because they have been low numbered cards, and I'm very happy to add them to my collection. Someone's just gone to the effort of grading it for me. That's the way I sort of look at it. I have no issues at all that this card is PSA 8. Obviously, the person who bought this card had absolutely no issue with it either. And I think that's the next thing that we should really move on to is, so what does this sale mean for basketball cards in the future? So I have 2 thoughts about this, which I think are worth mentioning. The most important thought to me is that I think potentially this collector sees one of 2 things: a player who has the credentials, who matches some of the all-timers, and his credentials are still growing in terms of championships, his points, assists, his records that are breaking. But at the same time, Steph is still in the shadows of Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, and you could even argue hobby-wise he's in the shadow of Luka Doncic, which in some ways seems insane that we're having this conversation. And this also goes back to a little bit of my own sort of, hobby love for Steph Curry. I think, and this is, blatantly obvious to me now that I've done this little exercise, I just haven't been giving this guy enough respect. So maybe this is the general consensus out there that Luka is getting a whole lot more hobby attention than what Steph Curry is, when realistically, maybe the person is being in front of us, just hiding in plain sight. The other thought that we probably should discuss too is that actually, is this an undervalued asset despite the fact that it's the all-time highest selling basketball card ever? So what does that mean for cards moving forward? So potentially in the future, you're going to see even higher sale prices for Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Giannis moving forward. So that's something that I'm really interested to see, what happens moving forward is this now somehow going to be the floor of what we're expecting to see for these, ultra low pop, ultra iconic, RPA cards. And without being the pessimist, my one sort of last thought that I had about this when I was doing my prep was that actually, is this one of the bubble cards? Was this purchased during the absolute peak of basketball card purchasing? And, did the buyer get caught up in that sort of huge surge that we're all sort of riding this massive wave when cards were, twice the price or sometimes even 3 times the price? Like the Jordan that went for that absolutely huge value too, like that 10x in 12 months. So that's something to keep in mind too. Irregardless of all those, little thoughts and, thought bubbles, comments, whatever, this card is absolutely number one and it deserves to be up there. So I am going to end this episode on a completely different track because this card didn't get an honorable mention. It didn't make the top 10 list, but it still has to be mentioned. And Adam Crosley mentioned this card to me in PM. So again, Adam, thank you so much for all your contributions to today's episode. I really couldn't have done it without you, mate, and I hope you've enjoyed it. The card that he actually nominated was the Steph Curry 12-13 Prism. Very, very, very interestingly, the base card last sold for $93 USD. So that is the first year Prism card. It is definitely an iconic card. To that point, this year's Prism actually did a tribute set for that particular card. It did Steph Curry. It did a Zion Williamson tribute card. There's a LeBron James in there. They did a whole set on these. It is a really beautiful set. If you are looking to pick up something on a budget, so if your budget is $100 US, that is a way that you could spend your money, and I think that is a really nice purchase. The other way that you could play this too is you could look at the tribute cards from this year. The base is currently selling for about $10 USD. The short printed cards, so I found a fast break had sold for $42 USD. So again, not exactly something cheap, but if that's in your price range and you want to get in on some Steph Curry action, definitely something you could take a look at there too. Alrighty guys, we're going to tie this up here. Adam and I are actually hoping to get another episode out before Christmas and New Year's comes around, but in saying that, just due to the time of year, how busy that everyone is, it's possible we won't do that. In the event that we don't get an episode out, we would like to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We hope you all stay safe, and we can't wait to catch up with everybody in the new year. So thank you so much for listening and for your support, and have a great Christmas.